Greetings, programs, and welcome to Q&D number 8. And this is just as Jingles is on the cusp of his Mingles with Jingles number 100. So I might be lagging behind a little bit here. Also, it's been a couple of months since the last one, and much like the last one, it's only people prodding me and saying, when's the next Q&D video coming on, that's actually reminded me that this is the series that I do and should actually make more effort to be more regular at, and somehow never quite managed to. But anyway, just before we start, I have put my camera in a slightly different place. I repurposed an old microphone stand that I found, and I'm using that for my webcam, and it's still the same webcam, but the lighting should be a bit better, so the quality might look a little bit better. Hopefully it does. All that said, and I know I said this last time as well, this should be a reasonably short video. This actually should be a shorter video than the last one, which was like... It was over half an hour, I think. It was more like 45 minutes. It was a long one. But there aren't so many questions this time round, so maybe I'll get through quicker, maybe I'll blather on less. I don't know, we'll see. First off, we have Majestic Moose asking, how do I feel about Americanisms creeping into proper English? Well... I'm kind of... Jingles has talked a bit about this, having mentioned Mingles with Jingles already. He's actually, like the last couple of episodes, this has come up a couple of times. And I kind of think that, like, language is a living thing, and honestly, I'm kind of okay with, like, as long as people can understand each other. Which, you know, I know me saying this is just maybe a slight flavour of irony there, but I'm kind of okay with English borrowing words from other places, because that's what English has done all along, to be honest, and as long as people understand what other people mean. I mean, the example he gives is saying store instead of shop, or I guess another one would be movie instead of film, but honestly, I don't know that it really, like... I'm not a purist, you know. I'm quite happy that we don't have anything like the Académie Française. We don't... I don't know, I think English is big enough and ugly enough that it doesn't need its own kind of like police force, as it were. It doesn't need its own shepherds. Although some people try to anyway, but as long as people are more or less making sense and following some basic rules, like, you know, using capitalization and at least attempting proper punctuation, then it's fine. I'm really not that fussed about it, and maybe that's not the response you were expecting from me, but you also have to bear in mind that people tend to, and this I think goes for all nations, but people tend to have like a kind of a monolithic idea of a language, and they think, say, all Germans sound the same, or all Brits sound the same, or, you know, for any country you like. But of course, all these countries have, all but the smallest countries have sometimes very heavy regional variations, and they have their own, to the extent of, like, I'm trying to think of a specific, a very good local example is just within the UK. Okay, you think of the UK, you know, the mother country, you know, the home of English. Just within the UK, we have Welsh, we have Scots Gaelic spoken. I'm sure there are some Irish Gaelic speakers in Northern Ireland. You've also got Ullans is still spoken in the Northern Ireland, and no, not Ullans, was it, or is it Lallans I'm thinking of? I think it is Ullans. And you still have some speakers, although there aren't really any, say, native speakers anymore, but you've also got people that have learned to speak Manx Gaelic, and there are people that speak Scots, and, you know, there's a rich... This is even, you know, within the UK, there's all these different languages, and they're minority languages, but it's not like we're even all purely English speakers. And in my own neck of the woods, where... obviously, Gaelic was the prevalent language. It's only as recent as, I think it was the mid-70s, like the last person who just purely spoke Gaelic didn't speak a word of English that lived here in the Western Isles. It was only in the 70s that they passed away, so it's not that long ago, when you don't have to go back that many decades to find places where people would purely speak Gaelic or Welsh or whatever. So it's a little bit more of a complicated picture, and even within English itself, you've got all the different kind of the regional variations and the dialects and whatever. So it's a complicated picture. It's not really, you know, that goes the same for every country as well. There are variations within France and Germany, and just even taking into account the variations in accent in various places. So it's like, yeah, these things are never as simple as they first appear. So that was my slightly complicated answer to probably a question that you were expecting a different answer to. So there you go. Next up, the Magic Scatlon asks, have I read any Bernard Cornwell novels, and if so, did I like them? I actually haven't. I know of him, I know of his writings, but I've never actually read any. I don't tend to be a big reader of like historical fiction. And that's not to say I haven't read historical fiction that I've enjoyed greatly. Lindsay Davis comes to mind. She's written a series of really excellent novels around a character called Marcus Dinius Falco. We're way back in the days of ancient Rome, and it's in, I think the earliest novels she's written featuring him are, I think, AD 69, something like that, and it covers a couple of years after that. And they're very, very well written, very well researched. So there are kind of like exceptions. There are people I'm specifically a fan of that do write that kind of fiction, that kind of historical fiction. But for the most part, unsurprisingly, you know, I've said this previously, I'm a big fan of sci-fi, so that's the majority of my readings. But I don't know, Bernard Cornwell, maybe at some point I'll get round to reading him. You know, every so often I just think I'll give some random author a go that I've heard of but never actually read, and sometimes I like them, sometimes I don't. So, you know, that might be the case with his works. We'll see. Bogally Watt asks, if we send in a replay and it doesn't get featured, should we leave it or send it in again, hoping you see it? This is, I think I'm at the stage where I basically just keep all the emails that get sent to me, replays emails. And what I do, and you'll notice this, I feature a real mix of, I usually remember to mention, but like older replays. So I'll say one video I'll do an up-to-date, you know, 9.6 replay, and then the next video will be a 9.2 replay kind of thing. So I've got old client versions. So what I tend to do, and I've talked about this before, is what I tend to do is go through my inbox and I look for specific tags. So if you're sending me the same replay over and over again, it isn't any more likely to get seen. I'm not discarding old emails, but it might be at some point that, well, I know this happens with Jingles, he gets sent so many that he has to basically clear out his inbox once a month, just delete everything. At that point he goes through and he picks out a bunch to save kind of thing that he then might use. So I might get to that stage myself where actually, yeah, maybe it would be a good idea for you to send it if it's been a couple of months and it hasn't appeared. But honestly, at the moment, no, it's not worth it. If I come to it and it's a tank I'm looking for, or there's a medal I'm looking for, or a specific description of something, like I'm searching for, you know, silly games or whatever, then it might well appear. So this is why, and I'm going to conclude the answer to this question with a little PSA, it's really useful to me if you actually say something about the replay itself, like you say what medals you got or what tank it's in, if there's a particular thing that happened, you know, all this kind of thing is really useful to me when I'm searching through emails. So just a link on its own is a bad plan, whereas if you say something about the link that you're putting into what replays, then it's much more likely that at the very least I will read the email and look at the results screen, maybe even download it and you know, shortlist it for on any given day. So there you go, now you know. Chaos Kind asks, since I'm obviously a massive fan of sci-fi, his words, do you follow or even support in any way the development of real-life space technology, like for instance the recent test flight of as of 3 months ago, of the Orion and the government-backed British Skylon project, or the exploits of SpaceX and the like? I kind of vaguely follow some of it. Like, talking of SpaceX, they recently tried to, like, they've had this technology project going for a little while, and it's now at a kind of a quite developed stage where what they're trying to do is land resupply rockets reusable resupply rockets on a platform. They're trying to prove this technology that they can land it on a platform at sea. And it didn't go so well. So they managed to get their Falcon 9 rocket to more or less land on the platform. And then at that point, it kind of all went a bit pear-shaped because it had too much lateral velocity. And they didn't have any control in the... because they're like control things at the top of the rocket. So what happened was it was moving sideways as it was coming down, and because it had too much velocity, when it actually touched down, it just toppled over. Made a little bit of a mess of the platform, although I think the platform was alright. But it was a good try. You know, it didn't all explode horribly. It's just the rocket fell over, which is not quite so good. It's not really what you want, but stuff like that, I mean, it's really interesting. So yeah, I kind of follow the headlines. I don't follow it in any in-depth way, but I do, like, if I catch a headline for that kind of thing, I will read about it. Because yeah, I do find it quite interesting, because we basically live in the future at this point, and some of the stuff that's going on right now is pretty damn cool. Tydoring asks, what was my most enjoyable line of tanks to grind, and why? This is actually quite a tough question, because I'm struggling to think of a single line where I enjoyed the entire grind from start to finish. In terms of like the least stressful grind, I would say going from KV1 up to the IS4. I don't know about enjoyable. There's some really good machines on that line, but at times the grind itself is quite difficult because I went up that line before I went up the IS7 line. Like especially with some of the stock machines, like the stock KV4 particularly was problematic because you're stuck with the gun from the tank previously. The top gun on the KV4 is unique to the KV4, and then if you go to the SD1 from the KV4, you still have a big problem because the best gun you can get, you don't even have the gun from the IS3. So you're stuck with a really terrible gun. So it's not ideal. So it wasn't entirely stress free, but still, in terms of the most kind of consistent experience, that's the one I would point out. But in terms of the most enjoyable, I'm trying to think of the you know, a line of tanks where I've just enjoyed it from start to finish. I would say, just in terms of fun for the actual tanks involved, the British medium line up to tier 7 consistently. Tier 8 I struggled a little bit with the first Centurion, and then the Centurion 7-1 I really liked, and the FD4-202, it's okay. It's not great, but it's okay. So in terms of like actual fun, there's some really good machines on that line, and I enjoy the low tiers a lot. I mean, the Cruiser 4, as you possibly know, is one of my favourite low tier machines. The Cromwell's a lot of fun. In between that, you've got the Covenanter and the Crusader, which are both pretty good machines actually. And then the Comet, which is not everyone's cup of tea, but I really enjoy. First Centurion, like I said, yeah, it's more the gun I struggled with that thing. But then you get a much better gun at on the tier 8, the tier 9 rather. That really nice 105mm gun on the Centurion 7-1, and that is a nice tank to play. So I would actually say, yeah, I'll take that as my most fun line. So you've actually gotten 2 answers to that question, one of which was not really an answer you asked for, but there you go, that's just how I roll. Nuclear Shark Attack asks, when the heck are you going to put a link up so people could sponsor your channel? You know, it's funny you should mention that. As I mentioned, announced in at the end of the recent video, I think it was the T28 Prop video actually, I mean, I'd put up a video the week previously. I did a little consultation video on setting up a Patreon account, and a bit of a mixed response. I think some people were unsure. Like, there's the potential to do it wrong, and I'm very conscious that there's the potential to do it wrong. So I've gone away and I had a very useful conversation with Highflyer, and I looked around at other people's experiences, and I took all the feedback on board, and I'm reasonably happy with what I've got as my initial offering. So you can find information about that below. But yes, that's kind of funny that you should have asked that 3 months ago, but just now I'm coming to do this Q&D video and I'm coming across that question. So yes, it has just gone up, and you can now do Patreon as a thing, and PayPal is going to be shortly to follow once I've figured out how to set up a donation the link as opposed to a button. So yeah, this is all very interesting times for me. It's all uncharted waters. We'll see how it goes. Okrilat asks, what do I think of the M3 Lee in War Thunder Ground Forces? Well, I think since this question was asked, which again 3 months ago, it probably has changed a bit. Like initially when it came out, it was a bit overpowered, and I think within a couple of weeks they actually rebalanced it a bit, which was fair enough. But I think it's still a reasonably fun machine to play. And I actually went and bought, as only my second ever premium vehicle in, well, second ever premium ground vehicle on third ever premium vehicle in War Thunder. I got the British version, the Grant, as well. So I've got both a Grant and a Lee in my War Thunder garage. And yeah, if I ever feel in desperate need of credits, I just put in that lineup. And the Grant especially, yeah, it's quite fun. So although it's possibly not as massively overpowered and fun because it was overpowered as when it first came out, yeah, I think it's still a pretty good machine. Although I still don't play War Thunder Ground Forces that often, but it's nice to have. I've got to the stage where I've played enough that I have a variety between the German and the Russian vehicles and the American vehicles, where I can have a bit of choice between what I'm doing now. I'm not stuck playing the same tanks over and over, so that helps a bit as well. Doing It Legit asks, if I woke up to a zombie apocalypse, what would I do and where would I go? But then somebody else comments under that, EC1888CFC, what a username, says he lives in one of the Western Isles, don't see many zombies making it there. Well, you never know, you know, the infection might spread still somehow, because we do have planes and ferries and whatever, so maybe, we'll see. But it's a bit tricky really, there's no... well, for one thing, we don't have any big shopping malls. Like, I know that's the usual thing, you go and hold up in a big shopping mall. But we don't really have any proper places that you could fortify either. It's just, like, outside of the big main town of Stornoway, it's all just little villages. And technically we have a castle, but it's not really a castle. The loose castle's more like a... It's a stately home with crenellations, basically. It was built in the late 19th century, so it's not a castle at all. So, I don't know, that's a bit tricky. The best place to be, like, if it came to it, there is, on the east side of the island, like, there's a kind of a peninsula, they're called the I Peninsula, where the Point District is, and that is connected to the bulk of Lewis by basically quite a narrow strip of land. So that would be relatively easy to fortify. I say relatively easy, it's still a good, what, 200 metres wide maybe. Possibly a bit, no, probably more than that actually, so maybe not that easy. But just also, a lot closer to me, there is actually, within Stornoway itself, just out in the harbour, there's a causeway out to a little island where the I don't know what to call it, it's not shipyard exactly, but there are ship servicing facilities, we'll put it that way, and that's got quite, that's just a road going out to that on a little causeway, so that would be a lot easier to blockade, so maybe there initially, like you could put some vans across or something, and then at that point, I don't know, that would be a bit interesting, really. I mean, I suppose you could fish, but yeah, let's just hope zombies can't swim. So we might get lucky, as EC says, the zombies might not make it here at all, but I suppose it's good to have contingencies for these sort of things. Alex Chavala asks, as a Scot, because I'm 100% Scottish. Definitely. Totally Scottish. Did I vote for independence from the UK? I really want to know what a Scot thinks about this issue. I mean, this is slightly less... Like, it was a lot in the news in various places around the world, which was slightly novel for here, because it's not often Scotland gets into the international news. But it's still like, it's still a relevant subject today because we're still here in Scotland in the aftermath of that. And there was a lot of fervour still immediately afterwards. And maybe it's died down a bit, but there's a background buzz that's there now that wasn't there before. And it's actually politically, and we're also in the run-up to a general election. Like, I actually have my polling card right here for my local polling station. So I'm not going to wave it around too much in front of the camera because it's got my address and stuff on it. So that would be a bad plan. But yeah, this coming election is going to be a very interesting one because we're coming out of the aftermath of the independence referendum. And as for myself, I voted no. And I know a whole bunch of people here that did vote yes. But it wasn't a majority, interestingly, because there was quite, like, I expected this to be one of the places where there was a majority of people voting yes, but there were actually very few places in Scotland where that was true. But basically my reasons were kind of partly historical, but a lot of it was personal as well, because I know I kind of, like, I grew up in Scotland, so that's why I tend to think of myself as kind of, let's say, Scottish-British, in that kind of order. But if somebody asked me my nationality, I wouldn't say Scottish, I would say British. I mean, the whole thing about being Scottish and, you know, fake Scottish it's come as a bit of a jokey thing on the stream, because of course I don't sound remotely Scottish, despite the fact that I have lived here since the age of, I think, about 3 years old, maybe even slightly younger than that. So this is where I grew up. You know, this is not here specifically on the islands. I've lived various places in Scotland, but this is like where my connection is with. So there's that, but also because my family's from England, I have a very large number of family connections to England, but also to Ireland as well. And it's more specifically the Republic than Northern Ireland, but it's like I'm just missing Welsh relatives, really. I'm about as British as it gets, because I think there are some vague Scottish connections outside of my just living in Scotland. But I have a bunch of Irish relatives through my grandfather, who was actually from, I think it was somewhere near Cork, but I'm not entirely sure. And my, English, the vast majority of my family are from around the Midlands, so there's that, I've got connections all over the UK, so when I say that I feel more British than anything else, that's why. It's because I've got this connection to basically most of the home nations. So that's, those were my personal reasons for voting no, but I could kind of see why people were so passionate about it, because the history, I'm sure I might have talked about this in the Q&D7 video, I can't actually remember at this point, but there's a lot of interesting history involved between Scotland as an independent nation and even before Scotland was Scotland. You go back far enough and Scotland was actually kind of split into a couple of different kind of political entities. In fact, here was actually, the Western Isles, the Northern Isles, and bits of Ireland were actually Norse for a good couple of hundred years. But even in the kind of the later history, where it's part of the UK and then part of the British Empire, there's a lot of complicated interplay going on. So some people did try and go down the whole, Braveheart, you can never take our freedom route. They were voting yes for that reason, but that was not only a totally unnuanced point of view, but it was also utterly distorted from the actual kind of truth, the historical truth as I see it. So I voted no, and my reasons for voting no were kind of slightly complicated, and I think some of the people voting no, I've maybe painted people voting yes. Some people voting yes didn't have particularly complicated reasons for voting yes. It was kind of a nationalistic pride thing. But equally, I'm sure a bunch of people voting no had not very complicated reasons. Like, they just, the idea of that big of a change was scary, you know, or I'm trying to think what else that's not a particularly complicated reason. Maybe they just thought it was a stupid idea. I don't know. So, like, my reasons were a bit complicated, but you know, there were a lot of people voting their own conscience for a lot of different reasons, and I think regardless of the actual how the outcome was, how people felt about the outcome, you know, based on how they voted, I think I do still feel a bit proud just how many people voted, and actually compared to other any kind of votes that we've had in the last decades in the UK. You know, it's been a long time since we've had turnouts that high for anything really. So hopefully the general election, there'll be, at least within Scotland, and hopefully some of it's filtered down to England as well, there'll be some kind of echo of that a lot of people will turn out to vote, because that's how democracy works, is people turning up and being informed about what they're voting for. So I don't know, fingers crossed. So 7th of May, it's actually quite close now. I'm pretty sure I know who I'm voting for, so we'll see. It'll be interesting to, like, the SNP in particular, I have a feeling they're going to do very well in Scotland out of just that, as I've said, that increased political awareness, that increased background buzz of activity. So I'm very interested in this result. We'll see. It could be, yeah, it could be very interesting indeed. Zug Mishral asks, what's my least favourite tank in World of Tanks, or the one I think of badly? This is possibly a question I've answered before, but then my answer might have changed since that point, so I'm going to answer it anyway. Of the tanks I've been grinding over the last, like, I don't know how long, of the ones currently in my garage that I'm not particularly enjoying right now, the T28 prop, but I wouldn't say it's the worst I've ever played. I'm trying to think. Honestly, I mean, it's more of a whole line grind. Like, we had a question about lines earlier, tank lines. Probably British artillery. And if you don't know, I have gone from Tier 2 to Tier 9 in British artillery and unlocked the Tier 10, but not bought it. And that was in order to get the British Technical Engineer Award. And out of that line, I most hated the Crusader SP. Like, that might be, like, I don't like playing artillery especially to start with, and so that's already, you know, I was already off to a bad start with essentially forcing myself to play artillery to get this pixel, you know, award that means nothing, but I went for it anyway. But of that line, the Crusader SP was by far the worst, and I was so glad to see the back of that. So, of the ones I've played in, like, the last 12 months, I would say the Crusader SP. But, I don't know. Ask me again in 3 months' time and I might have a different answer. Who knows? PPJ0241 asks, do I have the Valentine 2? And that he would like to see a review of it. I'm probably never going to do a full review on that tank because it's not very good. I do have one. I bought it last year, I think. They had a Valentine's Day special where it was 300 gold, so the cost of a full-priced garage slot, basically. Even for that price, I still kind of regret it. It's not very good. The gun is terrible. Like, you literally need to have almost all APCR. You can maybe get away with having a bit of regular AP, but it doesn't make credits because of that. I mean, the APCR at least is relatively cheap for premium ammo, but that's because you need a lot of it. It's got a weird crew setup, so you can't really fit many crew members in it, so it's terrible as a crew trainer, and you're not going to get much XP in it anyway, because, like I said, it's terrible. And literally its only good feature is the fact that it gets top tier always matchmaking. And the only other tank in the game that, the only other tier 4 premium I know of that gets that is the Panzer V2. But there might be others that only ever get top tier matchmaking, but I'm struggling to, I actually don't know if there are. There might be some of the tier 2 and tier 3 premiums that get top tier only matchmaking. But in the case of the Valentine 4, That's like the only saving grace. Like, it's so bad that they had to give it top tier only matchmaking because it's terrible otherwise. If it was a tier 3 tank, it might be okay, and if it still only saw tier 4s, but as a tier 4, you know, it's still not good. So no, I would not recommend it. I'm never gonna do a full review on it because I think that would just be, it would just be like 25 minutes of me going, it's terrible, don't buy this. So yes, that's my conclusion. It's terrible, don't buy it. Urban Tarzan asks, no, I think I actually said last time, just say Urban Tarzan. Yes, okay, let's just go with that. Urban Tarzan asks, would I sacrifice myself, as in death level sacrifice, whoa, heavy question, for the good of humanity and possibly beyond, if you knew that your death would mean an evil villain would die with you as well? We're talking about Caption Guy here, are we? An evil villain. I mean, you can, you know, I'm reading between the lines here, but that is who he's talking about. Would I die, would I sacrifice myself to take down Caption Guy for the good of humanity? I don't know, it depends exactly what he was threatening to do. But he is, you know, with Caption Guy it would have to be pretty dastardly. You know, we know some snippets and hints about his plans for world domination, and it is at least somewhat comforting to know that the fact that Jingles is also in the running, well, Caption Guy may well not be successful anyway, but I don't know. Maybe I will be called to make on that sacrifice. So that's a tough question. Maybe I don't know. For taking down Caption Guy alone, it would be worth it. You know, never mind saving humanity. That would be a good bonus, though. You know, being remembered as the hero that took down the evil of Caption Guy. But still, yeah, it's a tough call. It's a tough call. I'm honestly not sure about the answer to that one.
Our victory is in sight.
Second to last question. We're nearly there. Hildebrand, formerly HSM English, asks, and this is the comment that prompted me to get off my ass and finally do this. When, where and why did Caption Guy first appear? Also, does he make appearances in real life as well? I am tempted to answer this question seriously, but my temptation is not quite strong enough to overcome my other temptation to not answer it seriously at all. Caption Guy's origins are, shall we say, lost in the mists of time. Now, interestingly, it has been revealed that his name may or may not be Tyler Durden, but personally I attach no real significance to that fact. But it is interesting that if you look back at some of my earlier videos, Caption Guy was pretty confused back then. I mean, he didn't quite seem to know who he was. But as time went along, he seemed to get more of a firm grip of himself. Although, unfortunately for me, that meant that the insults and the unfair slandering of my fair name and good character got progressively worse and worse as time went along. So maybe Caption Guy finding himself, you know, maybe that wasn't a good thing, but it happened, and unfortunately now I have to live with the consequences of that. But yeah, the actual origins of Caption Guy, I think that one's a bit of a mystery to everyone, maybe even to Caption Guy himself. So yeah, it's just one of those things that's lost back in the mists of time, and maybe we'll never know, and probably it's a good thing that we'll never know. And the last question, which is a very serious question that I've saved till last, a very important question. Now, this is even more important than that question about would I sacrifice myself to save humanity. It's from Desquid352, and he asks, would I bring an AMX-40 into Clan Wars, and if it had the 152mm BL10, but it had a 40-second reload, would I play it? And you can tell it's a serious question because he asks it in all caps, and that's what has compelled me to answer it. Because, as is well known on the internet, that if you ask a question in all caps, that somebody has to answer it, because that's just how things work. So the answer is yes, because it's an AMX-40 with BL10, and even though it has a 40-second reload, it's still an AMX-40 with BL10. So yes, I would possibly, well, not stab somebody, but maybe, you know, wound them in some minor manner. I'm not quite at the level where I would kill somebody for such a thing, but, you know, maim them a little bit, you know, just a little bit, just around the edges, just so they wouldn't really notice it, you know. Maybe an eye or something, because then you get to wear an eye patch, and everybody likes an eye patch, right? Yes. So, yeah, I would. AMX40 with BL10, that's just like, oh. That's I'm gonna put that into my, you know, that can go into my ideas for fantasy fanfic folder that hopefully no one ever sees, and that I probably shouldn't have mentioned was a thing that exists. I really am just feeding Caption Guy a lot this episode, aren't I? Never mind. Anyway, that was the last question. If you have a question for next time, and feel free, as I said, poke me if it gets to be too long. Put it in the comments below, ask question, or well, just say question, because there have been times previously when somebody said something and it's not clear if it's something they want me to answer in the comments or if it's actually a question they want for the next video. So make it clear, question, and then ask your question, and hopefully it won't be another 3 months before the next one. Hopefully. But like I said, poke me if it is. Give me a good thorough poking. Oh my god. Oh, I just don't know when to close my mouth today, clearly. Okay. Never mind. Right, okay. So, as ever, if you want to leave any other non-question related comments below, you can do so. You can hit the like button, you can subscribe to my channel, you can check out my other Q&D videos, and as always, stay tuned for more.